Your children simply don't fit in with our social circle, my sister Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension as she adjusted her pearl necklace. The country club has certain standards, and honestly, Emma, it would be embarrassing for everyone involved. I stood in her marble-floored foyer, clutching the birthday invitation my daughter, Hannah, had received by mistake. Victoria's new housekeeper hadn't known about the family policy and had included us in the mailing for her son, Blake's 16th birthday celebration. Standards? I repeated, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. They're your niece and nephew, Victoria. Family. She let out an exaggerated sigh, examining her manicured nails. Family or not, they don't belong here. I mean, look at how they dress. And their manners. They're just so. She waved her hand dismissively. Common. My name is Emma Sullivan, and at 42, I never imagined I'd be standing in my sister's mansion, listening to her explain why my children weren't good enough to attend their cousin's birthday party. But here we were, worlds apart despite growing up in the same household. Victoria had always been the successful one in our family's eyes. She'd married Richard Hamilton, heir to the Hamilton real estate empire, while I'd chosen to marry Tom, a high school teacher who made me laugh and treated me like I was his whole world. According to our parents, I'd married beneath my potential. Hannah spent weeks making Blake a birthday card, I said quietly, pulling the handmade creation from my purse. My 16-year-old daughter had poured her heart into it, using her artistic talents to create something special for the cousin she rarely got to see. Victoria barely glanced at it. That's sweet, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. But we've already arranged for a professional photographer and a social media team. Everything needs to be perfect. Perfect. That word had haunted our childhood. Victoria had always strived for it, while I'd learned to find beauty in imperfection. Our parents had reinforced this divide, praising her achievements while viewing my choices with barely concealed disappointment. Mom, a voice called from the sweeping staircase. My nephew Blake appeared, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. Is that Aunt Emma? Before he could come down to greet me, Victoria intercepted. Blake, darling, you're going to be late for your golf lesson. The car's waiting. I watched as my nephew hesitated, then nodded obediently. He shot me an apologetic look before disappearing through the front door. The glimpse of genuine emotion in his eyes gave me hope that maybe he hadn't completely absorbed his mother's values. You see, Victoria continued once he was gone. We've worked hard to give Blake the right connections, the right opportunities. Your children, well, they just wouldn't understand this world. The world she spoke of was one of country club memberships, summer homes in the Hamptons, and social hierarchies so rigid they made my head spin. A world where worth was measured by bank accounts and family names rather than character and kindness. My children understand more than you think, I replied, tucking Hannah's card back into my purse. They understand loyalty, compassion, and the value of hard work, things that can't be bought with your husband's money. Victoria's perfectly composed face cracked slightly at my words. Don't be bitter, Emma. It's not becoming. Besides, you chose this life when you married that teacher. The way she said teacher made it sound like a terminal illness. I thought about Tom, who stayed up late grading papers and spent his weekends helping students who needed extra support, who coached the school's debate team without extra pay because he believed in giving kids a voice. Yes, I did choose this life, I said proudly, and every day I'm grateful for that choice. Victoria rolled her eyes. Well, that's your prerogative, but you can't expect your choices not to have consequences. Blake's party is going to be featured in the local society pages. We can't have anything inappropriate. Inappropriate, like my daughter's handmade card, like my son Michael's scholarship to the state university rather than a legacy admission to an Ivy League school, like the fact that we lived in a modest house and drove cars that were more than 2 years old. You know what's inappropriate, Victoria? I finally snapped. Teaching your son that his family's worth is measured by their bank accounts. That's the real embarrassment. She straightened, her face hardening. I think it's time for you to leave. The housekeeper made a mistake with the invitation, and I've clearly wasted enough time explaining why you and your children don't belong here. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a family photo on the wall. It was from 20 years ago, before Victoria married Richard, before money and status became her religion. In it we were laughing, our arms around each other, not a designer label or society page in sight. "What happened to you, Victoria?" I asked softly, gesturing to the photo. "When did you become someone who would exclude her own family because they're not rich enough?" For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, regret, perhaps, or a glimmer of the sister I used to know. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual cold disdain. "People change, Emma. Some of us evolve, move up in the world. Others," she looked me up and down, "remain exactly where they started." The drive home was a blur of emotions. I kept thinking about Hannah's face when she received that invitation, how she'd immediately started working on the card, excited to connect with her cousin. How was I going to tell her that her aunt had deemed us too poor, too common to attend? When I pulled into our driveway, I saw Tom working in our small vegetable garden, something Victoria would probably consider horrifyingly middle class. He looked up as I got out of the car, his smile fading when he saw my expression. "That bad, huh?" he asked, wiping his hands on his jeans as he came to meet me. I fell into his arms, letting out a shaky breath. "She said we'd embarrass them, that we don't fit their social standards." Tom held me tighter, his voice gentle but firm. "Then it's their loss. Our kids are amazing, and if Victoria and her country club friends can't see that, they're the ones missing out." Inside, I found Hannah at the kitchen table, surrounded by her art supplies. She was working on another project, her face serene with concentration. Michael was beside her, textbooks spread out as he studied for his upcoming exams. They looked up when I entered, and in their faces, I saw everything Victoria had dismissed as common: intelligence, creativity, determination, and most importantly, kindness. "Mom," Hannah asked, noticing my expression, "did Aunt Victoria get my card for Blake?" I sat down at the table, reaching for her hand. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about the party." As I explained Victoria's decision, trying to soften the blow while still being honest, I watched their reactions. Hannah's face fell, then set in a determined line. Michael's jaw tightened, his hand finding his sister's shoulder in silent support. "So we're not good enough for them?" Hannah asked, her voice small but steady. "No, honey," I said firmly. "They're not good enough for us. Anyone who would judge family based on money and social status isn't worth our time." Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know what's funny? Blake texted me last week, asking for help with his chemistry homework. Guess being rich doesn't make you automatically good at science." This made Hannah smile slightly. He also liked my art post on Instagram, before Aunt Victoria made him unfollow me. The fact that Victoria monitored and controlled her son's social media connections to maintain their perfect image made my heart ache. What kind of pressure was Blake under, trying to live up to his mother's impossible standards? That evening, as we sat down to our family dinner, homemade lasagna that would never appear on a country club menu, I looked at my children and felt a fierce pride. They might not have designer clothes or trust funds, but they had something far more valuable: character. "You know," Tom said as we cleaned up together, "maybe we should have our own party. Invite the people who actually matter." Hannah's eyes lit up. "Can we?" "We could have it in the backyard, and I could make decorations." Michael grinned. "I could invite my debate team friends. They're way more interesting than stuck-up country club people anyway." And just like that, Victoria's rejection transformed into something positive. We spent the next hour planning our anti-country club gathering, laughing about serving hot dogs and hamburgers instead of caviar and champagne. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but worry about the long-term impact of Victoria's actions. How would this affect my children's relationship with their cousin? Would they internalize this rejection, despite our best efforts to show them it wasn't about their worth? Tom, sensing my concerns, pulled me closer. "They're stronger than you think," he whispered, "and they have us to remind them of what really matters." He was right, of course. Our children had grown up understanding the value of hard work, the importance of character over wealth, and the true meaning of family. Victoria might have her country club and society pages, but we had something far more precious: genuine love and acceptance. As I drifted off to sleep, I made a silent promise to my children. I would help them build their own definition of success, one that wasn't measured by bank accounts or social status. What I didn't know then was that someday would come sooner than any of us expected, and Victoria's carefully constructed world of privilege and prestige was about to crumble in ways none of us could have predicted. 6 months after Victoria's humiliating rejection, I was grading papers at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. Hamilton Real Estate Empire under federal investigation. CEO Richard Hamilton accused of massive fraud. My hands trembled as I clicked the link, scanning the article with growing disbelief. Richard, my brother-in-law, was accused of running a Ponzi scheme through his real estate developments. The investigation suggested he'd been defrauding investors for years, using new investments to pay returns to earlier investors while pocketing millions. "Mom?" Hannah called from the doorway. "Is everything okay? You look pale." I looked up at my daughter, who had grown even more talented with her art over the past months. She channeled the hurt from Victoria's rejection into her work, creating pieces that spoke of resilience and authenticity. "It's about Uncle Richard," I said quietly, turning my phone so she could see. "He's in trouble." Hannah's eyes widened as she read. "Does this mean Blake and Aunt Victoria will probably lose everything?" I finished, my heart heavy despite everything. No matter how Victoria had treated us, the thought of her world crumbling around her brought me no joy. The story exploded across local media. Richard was arrested dramatically at his country club in full view of the same social circle Victoria had been so desperate to impress. Their assets were frozen, their accounts seized, and their reputation shattered overnight. 3 days after the news broke, I was working our vegetable garden, the same one Victoria had once mocked as quaint, when a familiar car pulled into our driveway. It was Blake, driving what looked like one of the few vehicles the authorities hadn't confiscated. "Aunt Emma." His voice cracked as he got out. Gone was the polished country club appearance. He looked tired, scared, and impossibly young. "Can we talk?" I led him inside, where Hannah and Michael were doing homework. They looked up in surprise, but their expressions quickly softened when they saw their cousin's distress. "Mom won't get out of bed," Blake said, staring into the mug of hot chocolate I'd given him. "The bank took the house, our accounts are frozen, and Dad's lawyers say he's looking at serious prison time." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know, Aunt Emma, about any of it. I swear." "Of course you didn't," I said gently, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "None of this is your fault, Blake." He looked at Hannah and Michael, his eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry about the party, about everything. Mom, she always said we had to maintain certain standards, but now—" He gestured helplessly. "It was all fake. Everything was fake." Hannah moved to sit beside her cousin, while Michael pulled up another chair. Without a word, they formed a protective circle around Blake, showing him the family support he'd been denied the chance to experience before. "Where are you staying?" I asked, already knowing we had a spare room that could easily be converted for him. "Some motel off the highway," Blake admitted. "Mom said it was temporary, but she's not handling things well. She just lies there, staring at the wall. I think she's in shock." Tom, who had come home during our conversation, exchanged a look with me. We'd had our differences with Victoria, but she was still family, and right now, her son needed help. "Blake," Tom said, his teacher's voice gentle but firm, "call your mom. Tell her you're both coming to stay with us until things get sorted out." Blake's eyes widened. "But after how she treated you, how she treated Hannah and Michael." "That's the thing about real family," I said, thinking of all Victoria's lectures about standards and social circles. "We're there for each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Later that evening, I drove to the motel Blake had mentioned. Victoria's Mercedes was parked outside, looking out of place among the budget vehicles. I found her in room 115, lying on a bed that had seen better days, still wearing the designer outfit she'd had on when the authorities arrived at her door. "Go away, Emma," she mumbled when I entered. "I can't handle your gloating right now." I sat on the edge of the bed, taking in my sister's appearance. Her perfectly maintained facade had crumbled, leaving behind someone who looked lost and frighteningly vulnerable. "I'm not here to gloat," I said quietly. "I'm here to take you home." She laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "Home? They took our home. They took everything." "No," I corrected her. "You have a home with us. It's not a mansion, and there's no country club membership, but it's real. And right now, that's what you and Blake need." Victoria turned to look at me, her mascara streaked across her cheeks. Why would you help me after how I treated you, your children? Because that's what family does, I replied simply. The real kind of family, not the kind that judges based on bank accounts and social status. For a long moment, Victoria just stared at me. Then, slowly, she sat up. I don't deserve your help. Probably not, I agreed. But you're getting it anyway. Now, pack your things. Blake's already at our house, probably eating Tom's famous spaghetti and meatballs with Hannah and Michael. As I helped my sister gather her belongings, designer clothes that now seemed like costumes from a former life, I thought about how quickly everything could change. 6 months ago, Victoria had stood in her marble foyer, declaring my children unfit for her social circle. Now that circle had turned its back on her, while the family she'd rejected was offering shelter. Emma, Victoria said as we walked to my car, her voice small and uncertain. I don't know how to live without all of this. I looked at my sister, seeing past the pearls and perfect makeup to the girl who used to share secrets with me under blanket forts. Then it's time to learn what really matters, and you've got family to help you figure it out. The adjustment period wasn't easy. Victoria, who had never made her own bed or cooked a meal, struggled with the basic routines of our household. The first morning, I found her staring at the coffee maker like it was an alien artifact. How do you survive without household staff? She asked, still wearing silk pajamas that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. We manage, I replied, showing her how to measure the coffee grounds. And you will too. Blake adapted more quickly than his mother. Within days, he was joining Michael for study sessions and helping Hannah with her art projects. The cousin bond that Victoria had tried so hard to prevent blossomed naturally without the artificial barriers of social status. One evening, I overheard Blake talking to Hannah in the backyard. They were sitting on the old swing set, the same one Victoria had once called charmingly provincial, with that condescending smile of hers. You know what's weird? Blake said, kicking at the dirt beneath his feet. I feel more at home here than I ever did in our mansion. Like I can just be myself. Hannah nodded, working on a sketch in her ever-present notebook. That's because nobody here expects you to be perfect. We just expect you to be real. Victoria's transformation was slower but unmistakable. The designer clothes gradually gave way to borrowed sweaters and jeans. Her perfectly manicured nails chipped from helping with dishes, and her immaculate hair relaxed into natural waves. The breaking point came during a dinner about 3 weeks into their stay. Victoria had insisted on cooking to contribute something. The result was a spectacularly burned attempt at lasagna that set off all the smoke alarms. Standing in the kitchen, surrounded by smoke and the ruins of her culinary disaster, Victoria did something I hadn't seen in years. She laughed. Not the polite, practiced society laugh she'd perfected, but a real, genuine belly laugh that brought tears to her eyes. I can't even make dinner properly, she gasped between fits of giggles. What would the country club ladies say now? Tom ordered pizza, and we all sat around the table, eating straight from the boxes, something that would have been unthinkable in Victoria's former life. As Blake told stories about his mother's previous attempts at domestic tasks, I saw my sister slowly letting go of the persona she'd maintained for so long. You know what the worst part is? Victoria said later that night after the kids had gone to bed. We were sitting on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine that cost a fraction of what she used to drink. All those people I tried so hard to impress, the ones I thought were my friends, they won't even take my calls now. I thought about all the times she'd chosen those same people over family. Real friendship isn't based on bank accounts, Vic. She winced at the childhood nickname. I know that now. I spent so long trying to be what Richard wanted, what his social circle expected. I forgot who I was before all that. The girl who used to help me catch fireflies, I suggested. The one who stood up to Bobby Thompson in 3rd grade when he made fun of my glasses. Victoria smiled faintly. She seems like a stranger now. She's still in there, I assured her. And now you have the chance to find her again. The real breakthrough came when Hannah had her art show at the local community center. Victoria, who once would have considered such a venue beneath her, sat in the front row, beaming with genuine pride as her niece presented her work. One of Hannah's pieces was a portrait of our family, all of us, including Victoria and Blake. She captured Victoria's transformation beautifully, showing her with relaxed hair and a natural smile, surrounded by the family she'd once rejected. It's called coming home, Hannah explained to the small crowd. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. I watched Victoria's eyes fill with tears as she stared at the portrait. In that moment, I saw my sister, my real sister, emerging from behind the walls she'd built around herself. Later that week, Victoria got a job at the local library. It wasn't glamorous, and the salary was a fraction of what she once spent on a single shopping trip, but she attacked it with determination. I need to learn how to stand on my own, she explained when I expressed surprise at her choice. And maybe help others find the stories they need, like I'm finding mine. Blake flourished in his new environment too. Without the pressure to maintain a certain image, his grades improved, and he discovered a passion for environmental science, something his father would have dismissed as impractical. One evening, I found Victoria sorting through a box of old photographs in our living room. She held up one from our childhood, two girls with gap-toothed smiles, arms around each other, not a care in the world. I want to be her again, Victoria whispered. Not exactly her, but someone who knows what really matters. Someone worthy of being called family. I sat beside her, looking at the photo. You're already on your way. 1 year after Victoria and Blake first arrived at our doorstep, our backyard was transformed for a very special celebration. Hannah's handmade decorations hung from every tree, strings of lights twinkled overhead, and tables covered in homemade food lined the garden fence. It was Blake's 17th birthday party, a far cry from the country club extravaganza Victoria had planned the year before. Instead of hired photographers and social media teams, there were genuine smiles and real laughter. You know what's funny? Blake said, helping Hannah hang the last of her art pieces on the fence. Last year, I was dreading my perfect party. Now he gestured at our modest backyard setup. This feels perfect. Victoria, wearing jeans and one of my old sweaters, was arranging cupcakes she baked herself. After multiple kitchen disasters and countless YouTube tutorials, she finally mastered the basics of baking. These weren't the designer cupcakes from her previous life, but they were made with love and only slightly lopsided. Need any help, Aunt Victoria? Michael asked, reaching for a cupcake, only to have his hand playfully swatted away. Not from someone who'll eat all my hard work, she teased, her eyes twinkling. The formal Aunt Victoria had gradually given way to just Victoria among the kids, a sign of the walls that had crumbled between us. Tom emerged from the house carrying his famous homemade pizza, another dish that would never have appeared at the country club. Food's ready, he called, and everyone gathered around. The guest list was different too. Instead of society families and business connections, the yard was filled with real friends. Blake's science club members chatted with Hannah's art friends. Michael's debate team mixed with Victoria's coworkers from the library. Even some of our neighbors had stopped by, bringing dishes to share. Remember last year? Victoria said quietly, joining me on the porch steps, when I was so worried about appearances that I couldn't see what really mattered. I watched as Blake laughed at something Hannah said, his whole face lighting up. You've come a long way since then. She nodded, absently touching the simple silver necklace she wore, a birthday gift from the kids to replace her lost pearls. I got a letter from Richard yesterday, she said. He wanted me to testify that I knew nothing about the fraud to help reduce his sentence. And I told him no, she squared her shoulders. I'm done pretending. Maybe I didn't know the details, but I chose to look the other way because I like the lifestyle. It's time to face the truth. Just then, Blake called everyone together. He stood in the center of the yard, looking nervous but determined. Before we have cake, he announced, I want to say something. He looked around at the gathered faces. Last year, I thought I had everything, but really, I had nothing that mattered. When we lost it all, that's when I found what real family means. He turned to Victoria. Mom, I know this year has been hard, but I'm proud of who we've become. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes as Blake continued, and Aunt Emma, Uncle Tom, thank you for taking us in when we had nowhere else to go, for showing us what family really means. Hannah and Michael moved to stand beside their cousin. To real family, Hannah said, raising her glass of lemonade. To real family, everyone echoed. Later that evening, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Victoria helped me clean up the yard. I have some news, she said, carefully wrapping leftover cupcakes. The library is promoting me to head of children's programming. Victoria, That's wonderful. It's not a fortune, she admitted, but it's enough. Blake and I found a small apartment nearby. I think, I think it's time we stood on our own feet. I felt a twinge of sadness. Despite everything, I'd grown used to having them in our home. You know you're always welcome here. I know, she hugged me tight. That's what makes it okay to leave, because I know we're not really leaving family behind. The next weekend, we all helped Victoria and Blake move into their new apartment. It was modest but bright, with space for Blake's science projects and a small balcony where Victoria planned to start an herb garden. Look what I found, Hannah said, pulling something from her art portfolio. It was the birthday card she'd made for Blake the year before, the one Victoria had dismissed as inappropriate. Victoria took it with trembling hands. I was so wrong, she whispered. About everything. Not everything, Blake said, putting an arm around his mother. You learned what matters. We both did. That evening, we all squeezed around Victoria's small dining table for their first meal in the new apartment. The table settings weren't designer, the chairs didn't match, and the pasta was slightly overcooked. But looking around at the faces of my family, all of my family, I knew this was perfect in all the ways that mattered. I've been thinking, Victoria said as we shared a slightly crooked chocolate cake she'd baked, about starting a program at the library for kids who love art like Hannah. Maybe a place where they can display their work regardless of their background. Hannah's eyes lit up. Really? Could I help? I'd love that, Victoria smiled. After all, you're the one who showed me that real art comes from the heart, not the wallet. As the evening wound down and we prepared to leave, Victoria pulled me aside. Emma, she said, her voice thick with emotion, thank you, not just for taking us in, but for showing me who I could be, who I should have been all along. That's what sisters are for, I replied, hugging her tight. 6 months later, Victoria's art program at the library had become a huge success. Hannah's work was featured prominently, alongside pieces from kids who might never have had the chance to show their art otherwise. Blake had been accepted to the State University's Environmental Science program, the same university Victoria had once considered beneath their family's status. And every Sunday, without fail, we all gathered for family dinner, sometimes at our house, sometimes at Victoria's apartment. The food wasn't always perfect, the settings weren't fancy, but the love and laughter were real. One evening, as we sat in Victoria's small living room after dinner, I found myself looking at the family portrait Hannah had painted, now hanging proudly on the wall. In it we were all together, smiles genuine, no pretenses or barriers between us. You know what? Victoria said, following my gaze. I finally understand what true wealth is. It's not in bank accounts or country club memberships. It's in moments like this. Blake, sprawled on the floor playing a board game with Hannah and Michael, looked up. We're rich in all the ways that matter. And he was right. In losing everything they thought they needed, Victoria and Blake had gained what they'd always been missing. In opening our home to them, we'd all grown richer in love, understanding, and the true meaning of family. It wasn't the life Victoria had once imagined for herself and Blake. It was better. It was real.